Cognizant to the needs of our learners, parents, and teachers, the Department of Education provided us with powerful tools for productivity that will allow us to foster critical thinking skills, problem-solving skills, communication and collaboration skills to be compassionate, responsible global citizens. Join us and discover new ideas in our series of professional development training program with the ICTS Edtech Unit and Microsoft Education Philippines. Together, we will equip our learners and empower our fellow educators for a dynamic future. Para sa bata, para sa bayan, at para sa guro. Sulong Edukalidad.
Magandang araw, Sir Wilbur po, at your service. Narito ang ETULay upang gabayan ka sa inyong pag-aaral upang lubos na maunawaan ang iba't ibang paksa o subject. Ang ETULay ay isang free online tutorial class na pinangungunahan ng ICTS Educational Technology Unit sa pamumuno ni Undersecretary Elaine Del B. Pascua. Ang programang ito ay hindi lamang para sa mga bata, kundi ito rin ay magsisilbing gabay sa mga magulang at mga guro kung paano nila ituturo o gagabayan sa bawat asignatura ang kanilang mga anak o mga estudyante. Sa kasalukuyan, ang self-learning module mula sa rehiyon ng Calabarzon at kilala sa tawag na pivot ang ginagamit sa ating ETULay online class. Kaya ano pang hinihintay ninyo? Ihanda na ang inyong mga ballpen o lapis, papel o kwaderno at samahan kaming itulay ang pagkatuto para sa bawat batang Pilipino. Sama-sama tayong magtutulungan para malampasan ang mga hamon sa panahong ito. Halina't matuto kasama ang inyong online tutor sa oras na ito.
Good afternoon po sa lahat, lalong-lalo na po sa ating mga mag-aaral at mga magulang who are watching our live stream of ETULay online tutorial. At pa-shoutout din po sa aming SGOD Chief ng Schools Division Office of Ormoc City na si Dr. Artemia Lloberas and to our Division Research Coordinator, Mr. Ryan Espina. And also, I would like to greet din po ang lahat ng mga research teachers sa buong Pilipinas na nanonood po ngayon. Magandang hapon po. Alright? Magandang hapon din po sa lahat ng ating online viewers. Hello po kay Elina Narido Turibio, Jane Wencita Dora, Mayumi Gonzalez Timbugan, Oliver Managbanag, Dihanyo Valerie, Kendra Duazo, Francis Conchanco, from LSBES North District, Erlinda Saison Finlac, Jamil Gutierrez, Hazel Ann Garciano, Stacy, Nisha, Ronald Joe, and a lot more. Okay, magandang hapon po sa inyong lahat. Ako po si Tutor June at muli, samahan niyo ako class as we learn very important topics for inquiries, investigations, and immersion. This applied subject for grade 12 is a culminating activity of our research discussions in PR1 and PR2 through qualitative, quantitative, and mixed methods research implementations. And today's exciting session will lead us to understand our topic on Quarter 3, Week 6, which is on research design. Specifically, at the end of this tutorial session, you are expected to have the ability to choose appropriate quantitative research design given a research problem or research objective. And for the information of everyone, ang ating pinagbabatayan sa tutorial session na ito ay ang libro ni na Creswell 2012, Planning, Conducting, and Evaluating Quantitative and Qualitative Research, 4th edition, and Frankel and Wallen 2009, How to Design and Evaluate Research in Education. All right. To begin, I would like you, class, to indicate whether each statement is true or false by writing the word true or false in our live stream's comment section. And we have 5 statements, class, that you need to answer. All right? Are you ready? Number 1. Getting the average time spent by senior high school students on Facebook calls for a descriptive research design. Is this statement true or false? Again, the statement is getting the average time spent by senior high school students on Facebook calls for a descriptive research design. Let me check who got it right. Again, students, please write your answer in the comment section below. We have Oliver Managbanag answered true, Stacy, true, Hazel Ann, Ronald Joe, and April also answered true. The correct answer is true. Good job. Number 2, correlating two variables is determining whether there is a difference between two groups. Again, correlating two variables is determining whether there is a difference between two groups. Is it true or false? Let me check your answers for number 2. Okay, we have Jean Kenneth answered false. Stacy, as well as Ronald Joe answered false. And you are correct. The answer is false. And why is the answer false? Okay, class, when you correlate two variables, you are not determining whether there is a difference, no, between two groups, but you are actually determining whether there is a relationship, okay, between the given variables. All right, let us proceed to our statement number 3. Investigating the difference in mathematical ability between UMS and STEM students is a kind of causal comparative research. Again, investigating the difference in mathematical ability between UMS and STEM students is a kind of causal comparative research. Let me check those students who are able to get the correct answer in the comment section. Number 3, what's the answer? Stacy answered true. Jean Kenneth, Francis also answered true. The correct answer is true. Very good. Next, let us answer statement number 4. Manipulating a variable to determine if it causes variation or change on another variable is an experimental design. Again, manipulating a variable to determine if it causes variation or change on another variable is an experimental design. Is it true or false? Allow me to read your answers in the comment section for number 4. Mark Platon answered false. Stacy answered true. The correct answer is true. Christine, Pagaduan, Ronald Joe, and others also answered true. Good job. And finally, number 5, a negative correlation means X increases as Y increases. Is this statement true or false? Okay, again, for number 5, a negative correlation means X increases as Y increases. Is this statement true or false? Let me check your answers in the comment section. We have Stacy answered false, Ashley Nicole, Jean Kenneth, Maria Gloria, Hazel Ann, Julia Ronald, Chanel. All answered false. The correct answer is false. It is false because a negative correlation means the variable X increases as the variable Y decreases. In here, opposite yung direction ng variables when you have a negative correlation. So it's also correct to say that there is a negative correlation when the variable x decreases as the variable y increases. However, one variable increases as the other variable also increases happen when there is a positive correlation between the given variables. So congratulations class for those who answered it all correctly. Pero sa mga hindi po nakapagsagot ng tama sa lahat ng items, it means you have a lot more to learn about this topic. Pero wag po kayong mag-alala. We are going to discuss this in detail as we will further elaborate the different quantitative research designs in our tutorial session today. Take note, class, that the third chapter of the methodology chapter of your quantitative research paper must contain 5 to 6 sections. First is the research design. Ito yung pinakaunang i-discuss natin sa third chapter kasi ito ang magsisilbing blueprint. Okay? Blueprint sa study ninyo. Followed by the sample or the sampling design. Next are the instruments or your research instruments. Then the intervention. But take note, class, that this section is only applicable for experimental studies. So mamaya malalaman po natin kung bakit may intervention section kapag gumagawa po tayo ng experimental research. And then lastly, we have data collection and data analysis procedures. Again, I'm telling you this because after discussing all these parts or sections in Chapter 3, I will be asking you to submit this entire section of your research paper for critiquing. So students, start crafting your drafts and kindly take note of the suggestions given in our live discussions. Now, remember, class, that the objectives in our study, which are translated to specific research questions, will determine what research approach and design is appropriate in our study. According to Creswell 2012, meron po tayong iba-ibang research designs na pwede nating gamitin for quantitative, qualitative, at saka for mixed methods research. However, this session will focus only on the different quantitative research designs. As time permits, we are hoping to discuss the research designs of the other two methods in our later tutorial session. So patuloy lang po ang ating pagsubaybay sa ating weekly sessions sa inquiries, investigations, and immersion. Now, class, different experts have their own take on the different kinds of quantitative research. However, our discussion of the different types of quantitative research is limited to 4 research designs, namely descriptive. That is when you want to simply describe the characteristics of the variables in your study. Experimental or experimental research designs. If you want to manipulate certain conditions and then study the effect of one variable to the other variable. Correlational. If you want to study the relationship between two variables. And lastly is the causal-comparative research design. That is, if you want to compare known groups to determine causality. Okay? But take note, class, that when we write the research design section in the methodology chapter of our research paper, we will not only write if it is quantitative or qualitative or state if our study is descriptive, experimental, correlational, or causal comparative. But we also need to state the specific type, again, the specific type under each quantitative research designs. Since your research design section must also give us an overview about the methods that you are going to do as the researcher in collecting your data. Let us start our discussion with descriptive research designs. Descriptive research class is sometimes called survey research, which aims to describe systematically the facts and characteristics of a given population or area of interest. Class, familiar naman po tayo, di ba, sa survey? We actually receive surveys to record opinions as voters, to register approval of a certain product, or to measure opinions about electoral candidates. Sa tingin po ng karamihan, survey research is simply a survey instrument, such as a questionnaire or interview. Although we survey people using an instrument in educational research, but the instrument is only one aspect of a broader procedure in survey designs. So when we say descriptive or survey research design, this can be used when researchers seek to collect data quickly, or if you just want to study the attitudes, beliefs, and opinions of people, let's say about a certain policy or issue, or if we want to survey a sample or the entire population to describe the trends or the characteristics of the given population. For example, let us say we decided to use a descriptive survey research design for our study, and our research question is, what factors explain why high school students hold positive attitudes toward possessing cell phones in school? This approach class provides an economical and efficient means of gathering a large amount of data from many students. We can randomly select a sample of students, sends them a mailed questionnaire. By the way, class, if we want to administer an instrument or questionnaire in the new normal, we can actually email our questionnaires to our respondents, or for an easier retrieval of data, we can copy our instrument or questionnaires in the Google Forms and then send the link, okay, send the link of the form to the respondents for them to answer. Okay, and after that, we collect our data. After we collect our data, we then analyzes the results and draws conclusion about the population from the given sample. All right? And the most popular form of survey design used in education is a cross-sectional survey design. In a cross-sectional survey design, the researcher collects data at one point in time. For example, when a group of researchers is conducting a survey of the attitudes of parents towards the senior high school implementation this school year, in here, they are recording data about their present views towards the senior high school implementation. It also provides us the information in a short amount of time, such as the time required for administering the survey and collecting the data or information. And this design class has several types. A cross-sectional study can examine current attitudes, beliefs, opinions, or practices. Attitudes, beliefs, and opinions are ways in which individuals think about issues, whereas practices are their actual behaviors. Another cross-sectional design compares two or more educational groups in terms of attitudes, beliefs, opinions, or practices. These group comparisons may compare students with students, students with teachers, students with parents, or they may compare other groups within educational and school settings. For example, one study compared rural and urban secondary school teachers in terms of their sources of stress and symptoms of burnout. Okay? Lastly, some cross-sectional designs tend to evaluate a program, such as a survey that provides useful information to decision makers. For example, the study of Dr. Gertrudis Mabutin, DepEd Region 8 Senior High School Coordinator, on the implementation of senior high school program in the public secondary schools in Eastern Visayas, inputs to policy recommendation, is actually an example of a cross-sectional design under program evaluation. The second type of survey research design is a longitudinal survey design, which involves a survey procedure of collecting data over a period of time, or the data or information is collected at different points in time, or data are collected in one or in two or more times in order to study the changes of the attitudes, beliefs, and characteristics of the population over time. Thus, longitudinal studies class require an extended commitment by the researcher and the participants. Since some difficulties may arise in conducting longitudinal studies, which includes keeping track of sample members over time and maintaining their willingness to participate in the study. A longitudinal survey design class has also several types. It involves the survey procedure of collecting data about trends with the same population, changes in a cohort group or subpopulation, or changes in a panel group of the same individuals over time. Okay? Thus, in longitudinal designs class, the participants may be different or the same people. They can be different or the same people. Let's say an example, we have, let's say the same people would be for, let's say, a tracer study to follow up senior high school graduates 5, 10, or 15 years after graduation to learn about their present careers or present occupation. Okay? In some surveys class, researchers aim to study the changes within some general population over a period of time. This form of longitudinal research is called a trend study. Okay, again, trend studies involves identifying a population and examining changes within the population over time. Okay? Okay, may technical problem po. Okay. Wait po. Okay. Okay, so again, we have three types of longitudinal survey designs: trends with the same population, and then we have changes in a cohort group or subpopulation, and changes in a panel group of the same individuals over time. Okay, now let us try to determine the appropriate descriptive research design used in the given study. Okay, is this a cross-sectional survey research design or a longitudinal research design? Okay, let me read the situation. Maria decides to use survey research for her research project. Her research question is, what factors explain why high school students hold positive attitudes toward possessing weapons in school? Her approach provides an economical and efficient means of gathering a large amount of data from many students. She randomly selects a sample of students, sends them a mailed questionnaire, analyzes the results, and draws conclusion about the population from her sample. Okay, so is this descriptive research, okay, or descriptive research problem under a cross-sectional survey research design or a longitudinal research design? Please write your answer in our live streams comment section. Okay? Let me check your answers. What type of descriptive research design is this research problem? We have Stacy answered cross-sectional survey. That is correct. This is a cross-sectional survey research design which examines current attitudes of high school students toward possessing weapons in school. Okay, very good. Let's move on to the second quantitative research design, which is the experimental research design. Okay, remember class, in an experiment, you test an idea or a treatment or an intervention to determine whether it influences an outcome. You first decide on an idea with which to experiment, then assign individuals to experience and have some individuals experience something different. Okay? And then determine whether those who experience the idea or treatment performed better on some outcome than those who did not experience the idea or treatment. Okay? In an experimental study, researchers look at the effects, or at least one independent variable on one or more dependent variables. Recall your knowledge class on these two variables, the independent and dependent variables. The variable that will be tested or manipulated in an experiment is your independent variable, or the variable that causes change in the subject. Okay? The independent variable in experimental research is also frequently referred to as the experimental or the treatment variable. Okay? And the variable that bear or manifest the effects caused by the independent variable is the dependent variable. The dependent variable is also known as the criterion or outcome variable. Okay? The criterion or outcome variable refers to the results or the outcomes of the study. Please remember that you use an experiment when you want to establish possible cause and effect between your independent variable, okay, independent and dependent variables. This means that you attempt to control all variables that influence the outcome except for the independent variable. Okay? For example, let us say that we have a research entitled The Effect of Sensitivity Training Workshops on Faculty Morale of Senior High School Teachers. In here, you want to compare one group of teachers who experience sensitivity training workshops and another group with training workshops that do not include sensitivity training. And then you control or manipulate all of the factors that might influence the outcome, which is the faculty morale of senior high school teachers. You make sure that personal abilities and test conditions are the same for both groups. And you give both groups the same instrument. In this case, the faculty morale questionnaire, for example. And then you control for all variables that might influence the outcome except for the difference in types of training workshops. Workshops that include sensitivity training and workshops that does not include sensitivity training. And we will be using this hypothetical study as our example class all throughout the presentation of the different experimental research designs. Now, for the purpose of this tutorial session, we will only be dealing with 3 basic experimental research designs. And we will also be dealing with the different variations of these designs. The first type of experimental research design is the true experimental design. True experiments comprise the most rigorous and strong experimental designs because of equating the groups through random assignment. Take note, in true experiments, the researcher randomly assigns participants to the different conditions of the experimental variable. So what do you mean, class, by random assignment? Okay, random assignment is the process of assigning individuals at random to groups or to different groups, no, in an experiment. You use a random assignment so that any bias in the personal characteristics of individuals in the experiment is distributed equally among the groups. By randomization, you provide control for extraneous characteristics of the participants that might influence the outcome. The experimental term for the process is equating the groups. Equating the groups means that the researcher randomly assigns individuals to groups and equally distributes any variability of individuals between or among the groups or conditions in the experiment. You should not confuse random assignment class with random selection. Both are important in quantitative research, but they serve different purposes. When you say random assignment is different from random selection. For example, when the researchers randomly select a sample from a population, that is random selection. In this way, the sample is representative of the population, and you can generalize results obtained during the study to the population. However, not all experiments include random selection of participants for several reasons. Okay? But a true experiment involves random assignment of the participants to the control and experimental group. Okay? This is the most commonly used experimental research design. Okay? This design can be read horizontally from left to right. We have EG is your experimental or treatment group, since individuals in the experimental group will receive the experimental treatment. So therefore, what would be our experimental group in the given hypothetical study? The effect of sensitivity training workshops on faculty morale of senior high school teachers. In our example, the experimental group will be those senior high school teachers who experience sensitivity training workshops. Next is the CG, which is the control group or the non-treatment group. So what is our control group in the sample study? These are the senior high school teachers who experience workshops that do not include sensitivity training, or senior high school teachers who do not experience sensitivity training workshops. Okay? Since individuals in the control group do not receive a treatment. Again, R stands for randomly assigning participants to the two groups, which means that you are not just simply selecting individuals in both groups, but you randomly assign them to these groups. Then we have O sub 1, which is your pre-test, and then O sub 2 is your post-test, and X is the treatment. Okay. The first measurement serves as the pre-test. The second measurement serves as the post-test. And take note, class, that the measurements or observations are collected at the same time for both groups. So anong i-measure natin sa pre-test and post-test in our given study? Since it's very important to know this, class, because this will serve as our guide when we write our research questions in our experimental study. So in this sample study, when you administer the faculty morale questionnaire before the treatment, that is your pre-test. And then, when you administer the faculty morale questionnaire after the treatment, that is your post-test. So therefore, your pre-test measure will be the average or mean score in the questionnaire, okay, obtained by senior high school teachers before the treatment. And then your post-test measure is the average or mean score, okay, from the administered questionnaire of or obtained by senior high school teachers after the treatment. Question: why there is a need for us to know the pre-test result of the variables in both groups prior to giving the treatment to the experimental group or exposing the experimental group to the experimental treatment? Now, we should be able to check prior to the experimentation that there is no significant difference between the pre-test results in both groups in order for us to establish that both groups are the same or have an equal footing in terms of the measurable characteristics of the given variable. That is, prior to giving the treatment in the experimental group or prior to the experimentation. Or to put it simply, the purpose of administering the pretest is to equate the characteristics of the groups. Since a pretest provides a measure on some attribute or characteristic that you assess for participants in an experiment before they receive a treatment. Okay? And then, after the treatment, you take another reading on the attribute or characteristic, which is actually your post-test. And then, the researchers may relate the pretest scores for the control group and experimental group to see if they are statistically similar, and then compare the two post-test group scores. So that, if there may be a significant difference between the post-test scores of the experimental group, we can say that that is solely because of the treatment that was subjected to the experimental group. Nakuha? Okay, the design class, this design is actually called randomized pre-test, post-test control group design. Again, randomized pre-test, post-test control group design. To illustrate this design, randomized pre-test post-test control group design, let's consider our study in which a researcher investigates the effects of a series of sensitivity training workshops on faculty morale in a large senior high school. So, what does a randomized pre-test post-test control group design look like? Okay, so look at the figure we have here. The researcher randomly selects a sample of 100 teachers from all the teachers in that school. Okay, so that is actually random selection. Okay, now, after randomly selecting 100 teachers, okay, the researcher then randomly assigns the teachers in that school to two groups. Okay, one exposes, or a group that is exposed by the treatment, and another group not exposed to the treatment, which is actually your training. Okay? And then, number 3, you measure the morale of each group using a questionnaire. In this case, we have the faculty morale questionnaire. All right? Now, you administer the faculty morale questionnaire before and after the treatment, because from the name itself, pre-test, post-test, meaning you need to have a pre-test, and then after the treatment, you administer again the same instrument, that is your post-test. Nakuha po ba? Okay. Now, the second variation of a true experimental research design is the randomized post-test only control group design, which involves two groups pa din, both of which are formed by random assignment. So meron pa ring random assignment. One group receives the experimental treatment, while the other does not receive the experimental treatment. And then both groups are post-tested on the dependent variable, which means in here, you will not be collecting data anymore before the treatment or intervention. You will not be doing pre-observation or pre-test. Okay? You will administer directly the post-test after the treatment. Okay? Please look at the diagram of this design. We have, again, your R, random assignment of individuals to groups. Your O here, again, is the measurement of the dependent or outcome variable. And then your X is the group exposed to the treatment. Okay? C, meaning this group is the control group or the group not exposed to the treatment. Now, to illustrate this design, randomized post-test only control group design, consider again our sample study in which a researcher investigates the effects of a series of sensitivity training or sensitivity training workshops on faculty morale in a large senior high school. Okay, the researcher randomly selects a sample of 100 teachers from all the teachers in the school, and then the researcher randomly assigns 50 teachers to each group, 50 teachers in the experimental group, and then randomly assigns 50 teachers to the control group. Okay? And then measures the morale of each group using a questionnaire that is after the treatment. So as you can see, wala na po tayong pretest. Okay? So please look at the figure para po maintindihan kung paano gumawa po ng randomized post-test only control group design. Again, we stress that it is important to keep clear the distinction between random selection and random assignment. Okay, both involves the process of randomization, but for a different purpose. When you say random selection, if you will recall, it is intended to provide a representative sample, but it may or may not be accompanied by random assignment of subjects to groups. But when you say random assignment, this is intended to equate the groups and often is not accompanied by random selection. Okay? Now, the third variation of a true experimental research design is the randomized Solomon four-group design, which combines the pre-test, post-test control group, and post-test only control group designs. Okay? The first two groups represent the pre-test, post-test control group design, while the last two groups represent the post-test only control group design. This is an attempt to eliminate the possible effect of a pretest. It involves random assignment of subjects to four groups. Again, we have two treatment groups and we have two control groups, with two of the groups being pretested and two are not pretested. One of the pretested groups and one of the unpretested groups is exposed to the experimental treatment, and all four groups are then post-tested. Okay, we have a diagram that shows the illustration of our randomized Solomon four-group design. So we have the first group, group number one, or the treatment group. The first treatment group, we have randomized, okay? Meaning meron tayong randomization or randomly assigning of participants to groups, and then we administer a pretest, and then treatment, then post-test. Group number two, that is your first control group. Again, randomized pa rin. Okay? You administer a pretest, then no treatment, and then post-test. Group number three, that is your second treatment group. Okay? Randomly assigning of participants pa rin, pero wala na tayong pretest. Okay? Meron tayong treatment and then post-test. Group number four, or the second control group, okay? Randomly assigning pa rin of participants to this group, no treatment, and then post-test. Okay? The effectiveness of the treatment can be evaluated by comparisons between groups 1 and 2 and between groups 3 and 4. And then, data are analyzed by doing an analysis of variance or ANOVA of the post-test scores because we have 4 post-test scores. All right? This figure class presents an example of the randomized Solomon four-group design. Again, the randomized Solomon four-group design provides the best control of the threats to internal validity. Okay? So we have here, again, we have 4 groups. Okay? This is our first treatment group. Then, first control group. Then, second treatment group. Then, second control group. As you can see, meron tayong random assignment of 25 teachers since, 'di ba, yung sample natin ay 100. So therefore, if we divide it by 4, so dapat tig 25 teachers po bawat grupo. Okay? So you randomly assign 25 teachers in each group. Okay? And then, for the first two groups, yan lang yung may pre-test. Okay? Pero lahat ng grupo po merong post-test. Nakuha? Okay. And then, yung may treatment po, yung treatment group lang, okay, yung first treatment group natin at saka yung second treatment group natin. Yung dalawa na control group, wala pong treatment. Okay. Now, same with true experiments. Let's proceed with the second, okay, basic type of experimental research design, which is your quasi-experimental. Okay, so again, same with true experiments, quasi, this is pronounced as quasi. Okay, quasi-experiments also has an experimental, so meron din po siyang experimental at control group. But unlike true experimental designs, there is no random assignment of participants to groups. No? Wala pong random assignment. So as you can see in the figure, wala pong tayong symbol na R. Okay? Which signifies that there is no presence, wala pong presence of randomization, okay, in this quasi-experimental design. Bakit class merong quasi-experimental? Kasi in education, many experimental situations occur in which researchers need to use intact groups. Okay? This might happen because of the availability of the participants or because the setting prohibits forming artificial groups. Okay? Since quasi-experiments include assignment but not random assignment of participants to groups. This is because the experimenter cannot artificially create groups for the experiment. For example, when you study a new math program, okay, studying a new math program may require using existing, let's say, grade 11 classes and designating one as the experimental group and one as the control group. Randomly assigning students to the two groups would disrupt classroom learning or would disrupt classroom classroom classes, okay? Because educators often use intact groups, okay? In experiments, quasi-experimental designs are frequently used. Okay? Now, this is actually called, in this figure is actually called a non-randomized pre-test, post-test control group design. Now, let us illustrate this design, non-randomized pre-test, post-test control group design, by using our previous example involving the use of sensitivity workshops. We can apply the pre- and post-test design approach to a quasi-experimental design, okay? But the researcher in here assigns intact groups. As you can see, wala na tayong random assignment of 50 teachers to both groups, but yung grupo natin ay intact groups na, or the researcher purposely select the experimental and the control group, or the individuals that will be included in the experimental or in the control group. Nakuha? And then, same pa rin, administer a pre-test to both groups, then conduct experimental treatment activities with the experimental group only, and then administer a post-test to assess the difference between the two groups. Okay? A variation on this approach, similar to the true experiment, uses only a post-test in the design. So we can also have non-randomized, post-test only control group design. The last type of experimental research design is the pre-experimental. Okay? Pre-experimental research design provides a comparative description of the variable before and after the experimental treatment. This is also referred to as one group pre-test, post-test design. Again, one group pre-test, post-test design. Okay, there is also no random assignment of participants to groups. Okay, now in the one group pre-test, post-test design, we have only meron lang tayong single group kasi one group, no? Single group. A single group is measured or observed not only after being exposed to a treatment of some sort, but also before the treatment. Okay? So we have here a diagram. So yung O sub 1 natin is the pre-test, and then yung X is the treatment, and then yung O sub 2 is the post-test. To illustrate this design, one group pre-test, post-test design, let us use this, okay, same example pa rin for this design, but with one group of individuals. So yung 100 samples natin, silang lahat, okay, ginamit natin yung intact group, silang lahat sa school na yan yung isang group na, okay, for one group pre-test post-test design. Okay, intact group of 100 teachers or select 100 teachers. Okay, then same pa rin, meron tayong pre-test, tapos treatment, and then post-test. Okay, naintindihan po ba? Now, let's try to determine the appropriate experimental research design used in this given study. Okay, let me read the research study. Maria decides to conduct an experiment. She studies the question, do students who receive in-class instruction about the dangers of weapons in high school have different attitudes toward weapons that do students who do not receive instructions about dangers? Using 2 health classes to participate in her experiment, she gives one class the standard health curriculum and the other class a standard curriculum plus a series of classes about the dangers of weapons among teenagers. At the end of the semester, she administers a survey measuring attitudes toward weapons in schools. Maria finds that the students who experienced the curriculum plus the classes about the dangers of weapons were more negative toward weapons in schools than the students who had the standard health curriculum. Okay, now, is this research problem or situation a true experimental? Is this a quasi-experimental or a pre-experimental? Okay, kindly write your answers in the comment section. Okay, by critically evaluating the research problem, ano po na design yung mai-infer natin sa method or sa situation? Is this true experimental, quasi-experimental, or pre-experimental? Again, meron bang random assignment or random assigning of participants to the groups? Meron ba o wala? Okay? Ilang group yung nandito sa problem? 2 or isang group lang? 2. Okay? And then, hindi po na-mention na merong random assigning of participants to groups. Meron ba? Joanna Antonio answered true experimental. Gerald Sebastian answered true experimental. Again, class, meron bang random assignment of participants? Wala. Hindi po na-mention sa research problem. So basically, this will be quasi-experimental research design. Specifically, this is actually non-randomized pre-test, post-test control group design. Okay? Kasi hindi po hindi po na-emphasize na merong random assigning of participants to groups. Okay? So this is quasi, specifically non-randomized pre-test, post-test control group design. Okay, correct po si Stacy at saka si Judea de Golacion. Very good. Now, let us proceed to the third quantitative research design, which is the correlational research design. Okay? In correlational research design class, researchers use the correlation statistical tests to describe and measure the degree of association, again, degree of association or relationship between two or more variables or sets of scores. In this design, the researchers do not attempt to control or manipulate the variables like in the experiment. Instead, they relate, okay, using the correlation statistic. Okay? Now, a correlation is actually a statistical test to determine the tendency or pattern for two or more variables or two sets of data to vary consistently. In the case of only two variables, this means that two variables share common variance or they co-vary together. Okay? Co-vary means that we can predict a score on one variable with knowledge about the individual score on another variable. Okay, so in correlational research, researchers create displays of scores correlated for participants. Okay, we have displays like scatter plots, a graphic representation of the data, and then we have a correlation matrices, which is a table that shows the correlation among all the variables. Okay, now in correlational research design, we have actually two types. Okay, first is the explanatory research design. An explanatory research design is a correlational design in which the researcher is interested in the extent to which two variables or more co-vary. That is, where changes in one variable are reflected in changes in the other. Okay? Now, the second type of correlational research design is a prediction research design. In here, instead of simply relating variables or measuring variables, okay? In here, you measure two variables at a time. Okay? In a prediction design, researchers seek to anticipate outcomes by using certain variables as predictors. Okay? For example, superintendents and principals need to identify teachers who will be successful in their schools. So to select teachers who have a good chance of success, the administrators can identify predictors of success using correlational research. Okay? Now, prediction studies, therefore, are useful because they help anticipate or forecast future behavior. Now, we have also what we call a predictor variable, okay? When you say predictor variable, this is a variable used to make a forecast about an outcome in correlational research. So in the case of predicting teacher success in a school, the predictor variable may be mentoring during teacher training, or the predictor variable can be the years of experience or the years of training experience or the years of teaching experience. Okay? Now, what's the difference between prediction aside from having a predictor variable for prediction research design? Okay, now, in prediction research design, the outcome being predicted in correlational research is called the criterion. So we also have what we call criterion variable. Okay, in our example, teacher success is the criterion variable, wherein the mentoring or number of teaching experience can be the predictor variable. Okay. Now, for to identify a prediction study, the author or the researcher typically include the word prediction in the title. It might be also in the purpose or purpose statement or in the research questions of the study. Now, the researcher typically measured the predictor variable at one point in time and then the criterion variable at a later point in time. So, hindi po sabay. Okay? Unlike for explanatory research design, sabay pong mini-measure yung dalawang variables. But for prediction research design, yung isang variable, okay, mineasure sa time na ito at saka after a certain o pagkatapos makita yung outcome, mineasure ang second variable or the criterion variable. Okay? So, in here, for prediction research design, we can actually forecast future performance of our participants. Okay? Now, let's have this research problem, okay, or this given study. Determine the appropriate correlational research design used in the given study. Okay, so is this an explanatory or a prediction research design? Okay, let me read the research problem. Maria chooses a quantitative correlational design for her research. This is her research question. Is the use of alcohol by students related to suspensions for weapon possession? Maria accesses school records for individuals cited for possession of alcohol and the records for weapon possession. She relates these two variables using the correlation statistic. She finds that the two variables are positively related. If a person has been cited for alcohol, he or she is likely to be suspended for weapon possession as well. Now, given this research problem, is this an explanatory correlational research design or a prediction research design? Please write your answer in our live streams comment section. Okay? Now, sabay bang mineasure yung variables? Or unang mineasure yung isang variable tapos after makita yung outcome, mineasure na naman yung second variable. Okay? Since, okay? Okay, let me check. We have Gerald, Sebastian Suwan, Jamil Gutierrez, Janver, Cedric James, Stacy. Correct. That is an explanatory correlational research design, which examines the current attitudes of high schools toward the possession or possessing weapons in school. Okay, now take note that one characteristic of an explanatory correlational research design is that the researchers collect data at one point in time. Okay, very good. And finally, the last quantitative research design that we're going to discuss today is the causal-comparative research design. A causal-comparative research attempts to establish cause-effect relationships by comparing groups. It is used to explore the cause or the cause for or consequences of existing difference in groups of individuals. This is also related or referred to as ex post facto research. Okay? Now, in causal comparative research, okay, the investigators or the researcher attempt to determine the cause or consequences of difference that already exist between or among groups of individuals. As a result, it is sometimes viewed along with correlational research as a form of associational research, since both describe conditions that already exist. A researcher might observe, for example, that two groups of individuals differ on some variable. Okay? Let's say, for example, we have here, we have an example. The research question, no, is there a significant difference between the scientific abilities of male and female senior high school students? So, is a research question under causal comparative research design? Yes. Okay? Because, okay, yung male, okay, yung gender kasi class, gender, hindi po natin yan unlike sa experimental research, yung variables natin, pwede nating ma-manipulate. Okay? But for experimental research, meron kasi mga variables na hindi po ma-manipulate. Like for example, the gender. Okay? Because that is already the sexual orientation of the particular participant. So hindi po natin yan ma-manipulate, hindi po natin ma-control. Okay? So therefore, we cannot use experimental research in this question, but we can use causal comparative research. We can look for if is there a significant difference between the male scientific ability than the female scientific ability. Okay, so actually that's that's the main characteristic of a causal comparative research. Now, there are three types of causal comparative research design, which are okay. We have type 1 is the exploration of effects. Okay, type 2 is the exploration of causes, and type 3 is the exploration of consequences. Okay, now, so you can see when you say exploration of effects of the dependent variable caused by membership in a given group. Okay, let's say we have a research question. What differences in abilities are caused by gender? Okay, so yung kaninang example or research question natin is actually a type of causal comparative research under exploration of effects. Okay, meaning we have a research hypothesis: females have a greater amount of linguistic ability than males. Okay, type 2 is the exploration of causes. The exploration of causes of the independent variable of group membership. Okay, we have a research question: what causes individuals to join a gang? Okay, research hypothesis: individuals who are members of gangs have more aggressive personalities than individuals who are not members of gangs. And then we have exploration. The third type is the exploration of the consequences. Okay, exploration of the consequences of the dependent variable of an intervention. For example, we have: how do students taught by the inquiry method react to propaganda? Okay, so we have the research hypothesis: students who were caught or who were taught by the inquiry method are more critical of propaganda than those who were taught by the lecture method. Okay, now let's try this research problem or this study. Determine the appropriate type of causal comparative research design used in the given study. Maria would like to compare the mathematical ability of young children who had enrolled in Montessori schools and compare the scores with a group of similar children who had not been to Montessori schools. Okay, actually, we cannot control those children who will go to a Montessori school, or those children who would like to go to a Montessori school, or children who will not go to a Montessori school. No, so we cannot control that variable, right? Okay, so therefore, this is actually an example of a causal comparative research. But my question is, what type of causal comparative research design is used, no, in this given study? Okay, please write your answer in our live stream's comment section. Is this exploration of effects? Is this exploration of the consequences? Or is this exploration of causes? Gerald Sebastian Suwan answered type 1, sir. Type 1. What is type 1? That is exploration of type 1. That is exploration of the effects. Is that correct? Exploration of effects, sabi ni Jean Kenneth. Stacy, exploration of effects. Hazel, and exploration of effects. Now, take note, yung exploration of effects natin, okay, okay, so actually, so we have Joanna Antonio said exploration of consequences. John Vergaba's exploration of cause. Okay, now, Okay, so as you can see in here, if we go back to our types of causal comparative research, this is actually exploration of the consequences. Okay, tama po si Joanna Antonio. Okay, very good. Now let us apply what you have learned in our exercise, in this exercise. Okay, please determine the appropriate quantitative research design to be used in the given research objectives. Then indicate its specific type. Okay, whether kung, for example, yung appropriate quantitative research design natin, kung ito ba ay descriptive, ito ba ay experimental, correlational, or causal comparative. And then after identifying the quantitative research design, kindly indicate its specific type. Okay? And again, please answer the following questions by writing your answers in the comment section. Okay, number 1. We have our research objective. Okay, our first research objective is to determine if the integration of video clips in teaching science is effective in improving the academic performance of one grade 5 section, which is selected randomly from 10 heterogeneous sections in comparisons with that of another grade 5 section, also selected randomly, that receives only the traditional lecture discussion instructional approach. The groups were not pre-tested. Okay, now, is this a descriptive research design, experimental, correlational, or causal comparative? This is a ito po ay okay, please write your answers in the comment section. That is correct, Stacy, experimental. And what type of experimental research design is this? Is this true experimental, quasi-experimental, or pre-experimental? This is true experimental. Okay? Very good. Okay, Julian is correct. True experimental. Kristan Jurin Butakan mentioned true experimental. Okay? Specifically, this is actually randomized, post-test only, control group design. Okay? Kasi wala po tayong pre-test. Okay. Number 2. The researcher hypothesizes that reading is intrinsically gender-related. Example, girls like to read more than boys. The presumed cause, gender, is something that cannot be directly manipulated by the teacher researcher. Okay, so we cannot manipulate gender. In this case, the researcher may compare a group of boys with a group of girls of the same age and grade level through a reading proficiency test. If the results show that one group, say the girls, performed significantly better than the other, which is the boys, the teacher may proceed to implement an intervention or treatment. Now, in this particular research problem, okay, or research objective, is this under a descriptive, experimental, correlational, or causal comparative research? Please write your answer in the comment section. This is okay, wala pong manipulation sa variable na gender kasi okay, we cannot manipulate gender, of course. Okay? So this is causal comparative, correct? Tama po si Julian Dehanyo, and that is type 1, exploration of effects. Very good. Christine Jorin, comparative. Stacy, causal comparative. Very good. Number 3. Suppose you hypothesize that the amount of study time of students the amount of study time students have is related to test performance. You first ask the students in your advisory class to record the amount of time they spend doing homework at home every day. You collect this information every day at the beginning of each class. After a month, you give them a long examination. Suppose you compute a correlation coefficient for the two variables and find out that that is 0.70. The relationship between study time and test performance is moderate and direct. The more hours spent studying, the higher the test score. Now, is this a causal comparative? Is this a descriptive research, experimental, or correlational research? Please write your answer in the comment section. This is actually okay, from the term, meron tayong relationship. So of course, this is, okay, correlational research. Stacy, Jane Wencitadora answered correlational research. Now, what type of correlational research design is this? Is this explanatory correlational research design or a prediction research design? Julia answered explanatory. Is it really explanatory? Jan Vergaba says prediction. Correct. This is actually prediction research design kasi yung pag-measure niya sa ikalawang variable is, okay, that is after a month. Okay? You give them a long examination. So that is a prediction research design. Para yung purpose niya is to predict, okay, the performance of that student in that particular long examination. Okay? Okay, last item. Okay, number 4, the researcher would like to conduct a tracer study of the graduates of the College of Business Administration for the school year 2008 to 2009 and 2009 to 2010 in a university. The present profile of the graduates, educational background, nature of employment, and employment history were sought in this research study. There were 90 graduates that serve as respondents in the study out of the expected 279 graduates. A survey questionnaire was used to gather the required data. Okay? Now, what quantitative research design is this? Is this correlational, descriptive, experimental, or causal comparative? Okay, it is obviously a descriptive research. Correct, Jane Wencitadora. Okay, that is descriptive research. Now, what specific type of descriptive research design is this? Is this a longitudinal survey design or a cross-sectional survey design? Okay, we have Fatima Dehanyo answered longitudinal. That is correct. This is a longitudinal, this under a longitudinal survey design. Okay. So congratulations, class, for answering it all correctly. Very good po. All right. Do you have any questions? May tanong po ba? Now, for your assignment, since this is 3 I's, you are going to write the research design of your own study following the guidelines presented in this tutorial class. You may post it in your FB timeline and use the hashtag ETULay III map your design. Again, the hashtag is #ETULay III map your design. At yan po ang ating online tutorial sa linggong ito. See you po in our next tutorial session, same time, same day. This has been your ETULay tutor, Sir June, na nag-iiwan ng katagang, the research of today shall speak the innovations of tomorrow. Thank you and happy researching!
Mga guro at magulang, ating pagtulungan, kabataan ay turuan natin.
Kahit na nasa tahanan, pag-aaral ay tutukan, oras at kasanayan ay ilaan. Sulong edukalidad, magbago man ang panahon, ipagpatuloy ating layunin, patatagin ang edukasyon. ETULay ang gabay sa pagkatuto, ETULay edukasyon itatawid sa iyo, ETULay paaralan nilalayo sa iyo, ETULay sa makabagong panahon, ETULay para sa kabataang Pilipino. Kayo ba'y may katanungan at hindi maunawaan? Kami ang gabay at tulay na magtuturo sa'yo. Sa tulong ng teknolohiya at maging ng social media, paaralan ay kusang lalapit sa'yo. Sulong edukalidad, supuin maling impormasyon, katotohanan nating ituro, paunlarin ang edukasyon. ETULay ang gabay sa pagkatuto, ETULay edukasyon itatawid sa iyo, ETULay paaralan nilalayo sa iyo, ETULay sa makabagong panahon, ETULay para sa kabataang Pilipino. ETULay ang gabay sa pagkatuto, ETULay edukasyon itatawid sa iyo, ETULay paaralan nilalayo sa iyo, ETULay sa makabagong panahon, ETULay para sa kabataang Pilipino, ETULay, ETULay sa kabataang Pilipino, ETULay, ETULay sa kabataang Pilipino, ETULay, ETULay sa kabataang Pilipino.